There is no better place to start with today than what happened Thursday, Friday, Saturday, over the weekend. 7 rounds, 257 players of the 2025 NFL Draft. And Cam Ward, we all knew, was going to the Tennessee Titans at number one overall. He was my number one ranked quarterback on the board. I see flashes in him, I see potential in him. And by the way, what the Tennessee Titans did this weekend to support Cam Ward, get him another receiver, get him another tight end, get him some offensive linemen. The Tennessee Titans now in a weak division with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who we're about to get to, the Indianapolis Colts, who of course took Riley Leonard out of Notre Dame. That's very interesting potentially in the late rounds of the draft. They also took Tyler Warren at 14 overall, who I thought was the steal, or at least one of the steals of the first round, at least up until that point of the draft. As you guys could tell, today, with this sort of NFL draft recap, if you will, I'm going to be all over the place because generally I don't love doing draft recaps. And I'll tell you why for two reasons. Number one is we grade drafts in two different ways. One is we grade them right after the draft based off what these players did in college, based off where they were picked, based off team needs, based off scheme situation, etc. And then we grade drafts 3, 4 years down the line to see how they really paid off. So it's hard in the moment to say, oh my God, this team had the worst draft ever and this team did a terrible job. But the Sheduer Sanders situation is so weird because the Browns, they not only moved at number two, which, by the way, for the record, in my mock draft, I had the first 7 picks absolutely correct in the order of which they went. Just flipped Travis Hunter and Mason Graham because obviously the Jaguars and Browns flipped spots. But I had those first 7 players all locked down in the positions to where they were going to go in the draft order. Browns move down from 2 to 5, and they not only get the 36th pick in this year's draft, but they get a 2026 first round pick, which to me told me, okay, the Browns are not in love with any of the quarterbacks in this draft class. They have Joe Flacco, they have Kenny Pickett. I'm not even counting DW4. I don't think he's ever going to potentially play football ever again. So they have Flacco, they have Pickett. They're just going to take the best player available, which I thought maybe do they replace Nick Chubb with Ashton Genty out of Boise State? Do they go with Menabu? Obviously, New England had taken Will Campbell at number 4. Do they go with Menabu? Or Calvin Banks, the left tackle that New Orleans got at number 9? Do they take one of those tackles to more solidify their offensive line? No, they take Mason Graham, who, listen, I love Mason Graham. I think he's going to be a very good player, but you just signed Myles Garrett for $40 million. You sold Myles Garrett on the plan at quarterback. This could not be part of the plan. I mean, so I didn't understand that from that perspective. And Mason Graham is a defensive lineman, which certainly for somebody that understands the importance of the trenches, for me, like it's a good pick. Again, I think Mason Graham's going to be a very good player. It certainly does not get the Cleveland Brown fan base excited when that is your only pick on round one. You don't trade up, you don't do anything. In round two, then at 33, I thought this was their worst pick. They take Carson Swevenger, a linebacker out of UCLA. I know JOK is injured. I get it. They probably needed a linebacker. To me, there's so many more players on the board there in that spot. Then they go and they take 2 running backs and Quishon Junkins in the second round, who I thought Travion Henderson, the guy New England got, a more explosive back. It reminds me order of the Nick Chubb, Sony Michel situation. Remember, Browns took Nick Chubb, New England took Sony Michel. Though I think it's going to be in reverse. I think New England got the Nick Chubb version of the running back duo this time. Um, then they take Dylan Sampson, who I thought was one of their best picks in the fourth round. But they also, in the third round, took Dylan Gabriel, who I think is an absolute shrimp. I don't think he's going to be an NFL quarterback at all. I think he's going to be out of the league in 2 years. And then Sheduer Sanders is still sitting in the fifth round. And no matter what Mel Kiper Jr. bitches about, everybody's having this flamethrower idea because nobody has ever seen anybody like this. Sheduer Sanders was projected to go anywhere from number two overall, if you ask my colleague at Championship Rings, Josh Unger, to 21 at Pittsburgh. And when Pittsburgh didn't take him at 21, you knew something was up. I had a feeling when the Giants traded up with the Texans, they were going to go with Jackson Dart, which LOL at that pick. Jackson Dart is not an NFL quarterback. But Pittsburgh didn't take Sheduer Sanders. They took the defensive lineman Harmon out of Oregon, which, yeah, TJ Watt's getting older, Cam Hayward's getting older. They have a lot of older players, but they need offensive linemen. They took a running back later in the draft, Jalen Warren. I don't think he's going to be the lead guy there. And Najee Harris is out the door now. That running back is more of a skid back out of UCF. So we'll see there. Steelers had just a very weird draft. They took Will Howard, the quarterback out of Ohio State, who I don't think is an NFL quarterback. I know all my Ohio State fans love him. He threw a wide open receiver, has never made a tight window throw. I don't see it. And so for that reason, I think we all can confirm that Aaron Rodgers is going to be a Steeler. But then on day two, New Orleans takes the kid Shiloh, number 40 overall, this 25-year-old rookie from Louisville, white kid, not high on a lot of people's boards. And again, the Browns take Dylan Gabriel. And right before that, Seattle traded up. They take Jalen Milroe, who I think with the Seahawks, who, picked up a safety. They picked up some offensive linemen. They did not do a lot of work at the skill positions there, but you have Kenneth Walker. I know DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are gone, but they do have Cooper Kupp. They do have Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think with the right coaching and the right system, and Quint Kubiak, who was the offensive coordinator last year in New Orleans, now comes over to Seattle. I like Jalen Milroe's potential. I thought he could have landed with a team that needed him to sit like a Cleveland or like the Jets with a veteran quarterback behind him. I thought Seattle made a good choice there with Milroe. Point being, Shedeur falls all the way to the fifth round, and then the Browns trade up 15 spots to get him. And, who knows? There's rumors out there that he bashed teammates in interviews, that the Giants apparently did have the worst interview with him of all time, and it wasn't a smoke screen. And he showed up late to a meeting with Brian Dable and challenged him. And I don't think it has to do anything with Deion Sanders' kid and the fact that Deion Sanders is the only coach he's ever had his whole life. I don't believe in that. And read into the war room whatever you want with Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. By the way, who knows? This was one of the strangest, bizarrest NFL draft situations I can ever recall. When Cam Ward was being picked number one overall by Tennessee, all Mel Kiper at ESPN wanted to talk about Sheduer Sanders. I've never seen a player that wasn't drafted yet fall this far and be talked about this much for pretty much all day until 2:30 Eastern in the afternoon on Saturday, 42 something hours after he was projected to go on Thursday night. I know he's in a situation where he's got a veteran in Joe Flacco. He's got Kenny Pickett, who was a backup last year in Philadelphia, never amounted to anything in Pittsburgh, did take the final QB kneel down, though, for the Super Bowl 59 world champion Philadelphia Eagles, by the way. They got Dylan Gabriel, who they did spend a third round pick on. Like, that's my issue, right? If Sheduer goes in the third round and you take Gabriel in the fifth round, you can just say, okay, we'll cut Dylan Gabriel. It's fifth round capital. Who cares? I think Dylan Gabriel was a waste of a draft pick. That's my problem. I'm a Browns fan today. I don't understand that. I don't even mind them taking another quarterback besides Sheduer. It's taking the quarterback and then taking Sheduer. And for the record, it sounds like they're going to all four have quarterback competition. I believe it's plausible Sheduer Sanders could be the Browns starting quarterback week one. So if the Browns wanted to win the preseason, that's what they did, because the Browns are going to be the most interesting preseason team in recent memory. I don't know what the restrictions are with Hard Knocks now, if they can be on it again like they were in 2018, but if they can, put them on them right now. Because Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Sheduer Sanders, and Dylan Gabriel are going to battle. One of them is probably not going to make the team. And for all this effort, I'm sorry, Cleveland fans. They didn't draft a receiver. They didn't draft an offensive lineman. They did address the defense a little bit with Mason Graham and Carson Swivenger, like I said. Um, th- you know, it is what it is. Even with Mason Rudolph and Will Howard, who will not be the quarterbacks, it will be Aaron Rodgers for the Steelers. Your quarterbacks are none in comparison, even to a healthy Aaron Rodgers and obviously Joe Flacco. And then what Baltimore did, by the way, getting Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia, in my opinion, the best safety in the draft. He was a guy that if he went to 32, I wanted my Philadelphia Eagles to potentially grab. And then in the second round, I think they get one of the steals of the draft in Mike Green, the defensive end out of Miami of Ohio. The Ravens are just improving their roster day by day, like they always do, and the Browns are once again the sad shit stains of the AFC North. Jacksonville. Listen, a lot of people are making fun of this general manager because he looks like he's 16 and it's his first big boy job, and Liam Cohen's there, but they're taking a swing. And this move, now I thought Travis Hunter was more of a corner than a receiver. What do I know? For all I know, Travis Hunter could become the next Justin Jefferson or the next Jamar Chase. And if he is, that trade up will be worth it for Jacksonville, even if Mason Graham turns into Aaron Donald for the Browns. Because I think that, you know, that's what is worth drafting at the top of the round if you're going to draft a receiver, is that Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, game changing type of wide receiver. I just don't know. The fact that the Tennessee Titans shows the receiver they had was mossing Travis Hunter, a defensive back. Like I said, I don't know. But the Browns clearly didn't want to take a risk on Travis Hunter. I don't think they saw him playing both ways. I think Jacksonville does, and Trevor Lawrence has obviously not lived up to that expectation of being this savior for the franchise that many people thought he was, especially when Doug Peterson came over that first year. They come back against the Chargers, they win that playoff game. They play hard against the Chiefs in the divisional round. The next year, they start 9-3. Lawrence gets hurt and hasn't been the same quarterback since. So it's a shot in the armor. We'll see if it works there for Jacksonville Giants. They obviously take up Joe Carter. He's going to be a really good player. I like the Cam Scatterbo pick. I think he's going to be a real impact player for them. I did not like the Jackson Dart pick, as I already said. I don't think Jackson Dart is going to be a real NFL quarterback. I thought New England and Chicago, for the record, both those guys, Chicago taking Austin Loveland, who was a wide receiver slash tight end out of Michigan. Then they come back and they get Luther Burden in the second round out of Missouri. Caleb Williams, DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunse, Colston Loveland, Cole Komet, Dolan Reiser, Jonah Jackson, Joe Tooney, Darnell Wright. The Bears are absolutely loaded, and you can see they're building in sort of the Detroit Lions image, if you will, with Ben Johnson. Boy, I know the Packers fans were upset, and obviously they got Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas, and we'll see how he produced for them. They obviously needed another game-changing receiver, and we'll see what Minnesota does. They get an offensive lineman for JJ McCarthy. And obviously, I think that's where they're moving forward now. We'll see how good JJ McCarthy does. But the Bears are going to be nasty. That NFC North is going to be an incredibly tough division to predict. And then New England. They get the tackle for Drake May. They go out, and I already said they get Travion Anderson. They get another receiver for New England. Yes, they took a safety on day three, and yes, they took a corner, Mr. Irrelevant, yesterday, who the NFL Network didn't even have tape of because he only had 8 starts in his college career. But for the most part, Mike Vrabel and the New England Patriots have completely changed the flip potentially of this New England Patriots franchise, who for the last 2, 3 years did not have any skill position players on offense, could not move the football at all. Last year they couldn't protect Drake May, and all of a sudden they got a quarterback. They spent money on defense with Robert Spillane and Carlton Davis and Milton Williams, some pretty good veteran signings to bolster up that side of the ball. And for the most part, the heavy hitters in this draft, this was all about protecting Drake May. By the way, for the record in the AFC West, boy, Amarion Amp to the Chargers. That's going to be explosive. Ja'ad Barron to Denver. I really like. I did not think they were going to go skill position in the first round because that's not Sean Payton's forte. They get another corner now opposite of Patrick Surtain to build that defense. The Raiders get Ashton Genchi and they get the wide receiver who transferred out of LSU. Very tough kid. The Raiders got tackles. They got skill position players. They went all tough guys. And Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, you can see them trying to build that image of they're going to run the football, play action pass with Geno Smith, throw the ball a lot to Brock Bowers. The Raiders got players. And that AFC West, along with the NFC North, are the two best divisions in football right now, bar none. And then you can see what the Jets did. They go out and they get Metaboo. They got the tackle out of Penn State last year. Now they go out and they get Metaboo. So now they have two tackles for their future, whether it's Justin Fields, or they go and get another quarterback next year. Who knows? We know Garrett Wilson's there. They go out and they get Mason Taylor, the son of Jason Taylor, to play tight end for them, who I think is going to be a very good, productive football player there in the second round. And Carolina, a lot of people thought maybe they could go Tyler Warren here, which I would have endorsed. A lot of people thought, maybe they go defense here with the kid out of Jalen Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia that Atlanta took, who also traded the first round pick for James Pierce. The Giants didn't even have to trade a first round pick in next year's draft to go get Jackson Dart. Yet Atlanta trades a first round pick in next year's draft to go get James Pierce. Yes, they got two new pass rushers on the edge, and yes, they needed a new pass rush, and we'll see what new defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich can do for that franchise. But that's another one where I thought Atlanta gave them way too much draft capital there. Uh, but I do like what Carolina did, supporting Bryce Young, getting Ted McMillan. I mentioned before in my mock draft, he was my number one wide receiver on the board. It's where I had him going in my mock draft for the record. I love that kid. Um, there was video that surfaced online, obviously, about him and whether or not he loves football and does he watch tape and all that. There was dispute of when that video came out, whether he was in college or high school. I think the kid is DK Metcalf 2.0, and you pair him with Xavier Legette, who's a very A.J. Brown-esque receiver. Last year, they traded up at the end of the first round out of Ole Miss, and all of a sudden, Bryce Young, who played well at the end of last year under Dave Canales, he's got two big bodies to throw to. It's going to be very tough for defenses to handle. And then lastly, I already mentioned to you, I love the Colston Loveland pick. I love the Tyler Warren pick by the Colts. John Campbell falling to 31 for my Philadelphia Eagles. Just another Alabama linebacker slash edge falling to Howie Roseman and Vic Fangio. They're going to find a way to get that kid on the field. He may be playing right away with the injury to Nakobe Dean. And this Eagles team, they pick up the safety out of Texas who just finds the football. He's going to be competing there right away with Sidney Brown for that strong safety spot now that CJ Gardner Johnson is now in Houston. You had that with the defensive tackle they got in the third round out of Nebraska. And Philadelphia just reloading. And so was San Francisco. They spent a lot of capital on the defense side of the ball. And Arizona, by the way, I wanted to mention this. They get Walter Nolan, the defense tackle out of Ole Miss, who I thought was going to be near the end of the first round. Maybe a little bit of reach there for Arizona. But then they turn around and they get Will Johnson, who was another player who I had a first round grade on. I originally had him going to Arizona at 16. There was concern about that knee injury potentially, but he's a very sticky man-to-man hands corner. And now that Arizona, they add Josh Sweat from the Philadelphia Eagles in the offseason. They add Walter Nolan up front. They add Will Johnson, who I think could be a Quinyon Mitchell esque impact at corner this year for the Cardinals. And it seems like to me that Jonathan Gannon is trying to rebuild what he had in Philadelphia there. Obviously, Kazir White is still there, and some of those players that came over with him from Philly to Arizona. But if Kyler Murray plays well, if they protect the football, you got Marvin Harrison there. Boy, Arizona's got some pieces to work with. And for the record, by the way, Tampa Bay picking in Jigba out of Ohio State, who I think is going to be a solid pros pro. Chris Godwin is getting up there in age. He now is that number 3 receiver who's going to eventually take over as that number 2 receiver. They got McMillan, who they drafted last year, the speedster as well. So Tampa just adding more rags to riches there for Baker Mayfield, along with Bucky Irving and the running backs they got there. Tampa Bay's got a very good offense there on that side of the ball. So the only team that I did not think had a good draft at all, and I didn't really understand what they were doing, is Miami. And no, that's not because they took Quinn Ewers at the end of the draft, who I don't know how good Quinn Ewers is going to be at the NFL level, but they have Tua Tagovailoa, a quarterback who I don't think can put you over the top. It seems like they're in a contract dispute with Tyreek Hill, who I thought guys like Tyreek Hill, Mark Andrews, Jair Alexander, maybe even a Dallas Goddard could be on the move. And none of those players were on the move. But Miami takes Kenneth Grant out of Michigan at 13, who I had more towards the 20s in the draft. I thought it was a little bit of a reach. They took 2 more defensive tackles, so they just completely stock up on DTs. And then in the second round, they trade up 15 spots for a guard. And as good as offensive linemen are, I don't think the kid's going to be that great of an impact player, especially when you have Tua, who's a very rhythmic quarterback who does not play well in the cold anyway. Miami, they needed a lot of help in the back end of their defense. They didn't really do a ton there. It's a very strange draft, in my opinion, for the Dolphins, especially with the rumors of Jalen Ramsey potentially going out the door. And I thought Tyler Warren was going to fall there for the Cowboys at 12 for the record. They did not do that. They go with Tyler Booker, who I'm not going to deny he's going to be a very good player and in a position of need. Obviously, Zach Martin retires. Dallas trying to re-beef up their offensive line. They did take another running back in the 4th round, but all they have now is Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams to knock off back to the running back position. Ryan Schottenheimer as the head coach. CeeDee Lamb mostly is their only offensive weapon outside of Ferguson at tight end. Guys like Amari Cooper, who the Browns traded to Buffalo this year and had no impact for the Bills in the postseason. He's still out there. Is there a reunion to come with that? Because the Cowboys still need upgrades at that number 2 receiver spot, in my opinion. Um, so overall, again, outside of the Dolphins and potentially the Browns having the weirdest draft overall of all time, or it could be one of the best drafts of all time. We talked about this draft, about a draft full of starters, not necessarily big wow players, but a lot of very solid, good starting players that can fill out championship roster teams on day 2 and day 3 of this draft, especially day 2. I thought this was the most loaded day 2 full of some first round talents that we have seen in a while. It was a very strange draft. We'll see how this Sheduer Sanders situation plays out. And that overall is why I don't really grade a lot of drafts. Say, oh, this team had a great draft, this team had a horrible draft. I thought there were some picks overall that I absolutely loved. But it's going to be very hard to tell who makes an impact in terms of the overall draft class for these teams until miles down the road. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.